Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sasha Parrish, and I am the project lead for culminating the top DEI insights from our founder and CEO, Pamela McIlvaine. On today's episode, Pam will be expanding on the hidden talent of people with disabilities in the workplace. Let's dive right in. Pam, thank you for being here. Would you like to please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Sasha. As was shared, I'm Pam McIlvaine, CEO of Diversity MBA Media, celebrating 25 years as an entrepreneur. Also, I am celebrating 2 years as a published author of my first book, Diversity, The Skinny on Diversity Recruiting, Best Practice Trends and Guides to Recruiting Strategies. Coming soon will be my second book, the fourth quarter of 2022, on the Skinny on Inclusion. Okay, Sasha, let's dive in.
Ready. Can you expand on the number of people with disabilities in the workplace? Is it a small group or is it larger than we expect?
Well, that's a great question. Unfortunately, it's larger than we expect. When we think about disabilities from a global aspect, it's in the United States, it's more than 35% of folks between 18 and 64 years old that have some type of disability. Then when you're looking on a global platforms, particularly just since I would say the last 18 months, 2 years, we've seen almost a 10% of folks identifying with some type of disability versus physical and or invisible disability, particularly with the increase in mental health. So we're almost half of the planet, half the population has some level of identified disability. Literally, they're talking 1 in 5 people that walk this planet has some type of disability. And when you think about the aging population and the fact that we're here longer, so there's a couple things. And I think about people with disabilities. One, you have folks that are aging older, so different types of disability. Menopause is becoming identified as a disability, say some experts. And then you have the workforce. You almost have 7 generations today in the workforce. Oh my goodness, we'll talk about that later. But with that, you even have other types of disabilities that are showing up and or hidden and need to be sensitized to that. So when you think about people with disabilities are differently abled, as some might say, you're really talking about a group that transcends all generations, all ethnicities, all identities. Everyone, regardless of where you are, how you show up, at some point is connected with a person that has some type of disability.
Wow. So what are some intentional strategies companies can use to recruit people with disabilities?
Yeah, as a best practice company, right? That's kind of the basis of the book that I've done is, companies do a lot of different things. And the first, I guess, what you want to consider, the practice that organizations do, they first try and align themselves with local organizations that are focused on supporting persons with disabilities. We almost call it wraparound solutions, if you will. So we're thinking about people with disabilities that, agencies that support, back and forth to work, transportation that supports equipment, accommodations. That supports, any type of learning. There's specific types of disabilities. So autism is becoming, or has become, from a neuroscience perspective, one of the leading disabilities that folks are being able to put, people in highly functioning folks with a disability or different ability in some pretty, dynamic roles. So when you think about, what companies are doing intentionally, yes, they're identifying local partnerships that they can have to engage in. 2, they're expanding their national partnerships where they can engage. Some of the most popular resources are the state entities rehabilitation centers. They also, organizations have what they call employee resource groups. And these employee resource groups are actually people with disabilities in the workforce that help company understand the idiosyncrasies within the culture and about persons with disability, to help educate the workforce, as well as help them identify some good relationships. So for example, colleges and developing a pipeline. The employee resource groups have connected with colleges, the college organizations with career centers and students with disability organizations, and created college programming, disability internship programs. We have some of our best practice companies that really have created very specific pipelines from colleges, from very intentional organizations to hire and train their students with disabilities. The other things that companies have done to be intentional, they literally have, created a process where they reskill a person with disabilities in helping them, making sure they can interview, making sure they understand how to do applications for certain jobs. Organizations have redesigned portions of their website so they're accessible with folks with all types of disability. So people are able to navigate the opportunities that exist within their organizations. And then when you think about it, you're like, wow. But then you have your strategic organizations that focus on creating strategies for persons with disabilities. I think about one of our strategic partners, Springboard Consulting, who's an expert. Their expertise is bringing folks forward with disabilities and strategies, not just integrating the workforce, but how to expand it within the communities. So when organizations are really being, intentional, it's about specific outcomes that they're looking to have, not just hiring. The last thing I'll mention, Sasha, about intentional recruiting is companies have hired what we call dedicated recruiters. So a dedicated recruiter that's focused on developing strategies to hire persons with disabilities, to find the talent pools, to connect with the colleges, and to create the programs. I know that was a lot to say, but when you ask that question, I'm like, whoo, that's a good question. And there's a lot, to be said around that.
Wow, those were a lot of impressive strategies. Going forward, what kind of training can recruiters go through to better interact and connect with people with disabilities?
Yeah, so, when you think about typically what organizations do, there's a couple things. Companies are required by law, the ADA, Americans Disabilities Act, to do certain, legislative training. So they have to train on accommodations. They have to train on accommodations. They have to make sure that their recruiters are trained on the legal aspects of asking every person, whether it's invisible or physical disability, do you have one? And if you do, how do we make a person feel trusted and psychologically safe where they can share, yes, we do have this disability, and can do that? Because once you get beyond what you're required to do by offering accommodations, you need to create a way. Recruiters need to be trained both on sensitivity as well as biases as it relates to hiring targeted talent, because you don't want to say the wrong thing. So there's etiquette training that also goes into the workforce, but we also want to, I think, should happen on the forefront with recruiters. Recruiters, we do a diversity recruiting boot camp ourselves in talking about targeted recruiting and what the substantial value and benefits it is for recruiters to be able to learn from each other. As well, it's definitely from the hiring managers they're working with, but definitely from each other in terms of what they already know and what they need to know. And so some of the other training, with mental illness becoming, pretty prevalent and obvious in the workplace, where companies are acknowledging it, I think recruiters need to understand now how to recognize and not just recognize it, but I was going to say be comfortable on PTS training among veterans, and those that may have some disability that's invisible, and how to help folks navigate that. So I know I'm talking about, what recruiters have to do by law, but I'm also saying what they should be doing because they're not doing enough. There's not enough recruiter training focused specifically on biases that exist, not enough recruiter training focused, on what's beyond what they can see. So where recruiters can come together in a both local environment as well as a national platform to talk about their experiences and so they can learn from each other, I think will be great. I think also recruiters can learn and learn from those partners that they work with to help them hire. Not often do they ask them about, how am I doing? What do I need training on? Well, they absolutely need training on, I feel, some of the dimensions that they're recruiting and don't truly have access to. Or they need to have that circle of allyship that will, broaden their lens, to help them be able to expand their acumens more around that. So I hope that was helpful.
It was. Thank you so much, Pam, for talking today about a topic that most people shy away from. I know I definitely appreciated the insights into recruiting people with disabilities. Make sure to tune in next week as we continue this topic of conversation and go even deeper. Thank you.
So thank you so much for insights and deeper dive. Please go to PamMcElvain.com and opportunity to buy a book, The Skinny on Diversity Recruiting, as well as review in Chapter 9, a little more detail with data-driven insights to help you with your strategy. See you next week.